Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 9 of Book Talk Today, where today we'll be joined by author of The Radical Leap and Greater Than Yourself and his new book, or most recent book, Love is Just Damn Good Business. Do what you love in service of people who love what you do, by Steve Farber. And we're joined by the author himself. Steve, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you, An. Great to be here with you across
Great.
the pond.
Yes, exactly. All the way from, I'm assuming, sunny San Diego.
That is absolutely right. Although not today for some reason.
No?
No.
Well, funnily enough, it's actually sunny in the UK, which is a surprise. So maybe we've taken it from you for today.
It's upside down day.
Yeah, it is. So I enjoyed reading your book, and I just finished it recently. And one of the questions I did have, or one I was thinking about, is you've written 2 books previously, The Radical Leap and Greater Than Yourself. And unfortunately, I haven't had the opportunity to read those yet, but I look forward to. Why did you go with Love is Just Damn Good Business now then? Why didn't you go with that one from the start? What was the evolution to get to this book?
Yeah, it's a great question. Actually, there were 3 books previous to this: The Radical Leap, The Radical Edge, and Greater Than Yourself.
Okay.
And you're not mentioning The Radical Edge was exactly the problem with The Radical Edge. It's like the forgotten middle child it was for many years. There are a number of reasons. So The Radical Leap, which came out in its original edition in 2004, so it's been around for a while. Leap and Edge and GTY, I call Greater Than Yourself for short, were all actually written as business parables. Or sometimes people like to call them fables. I like to call them novels because I think that's more accurate. Fables usually have little, fuzzy animals in them. Mine don't. So this was actually, Love is Just Damn Good Business is a departure from those because it's not written in that format. But LEAP is, the acronym LEAP is the methodology that I've been teaching for a long time, teaching to business people, and because I do like consulting and speaking and all that kind of stuff, as many authors do in this field. And the framework LEAP stands for love, energy, audacity, and proof, which of course runs through as a framework. It runs through the book Love is Just Damn Good Business as well. But really what I've been doing is teaching that love is not anathema to business, that love is in fact a very powerful and critical business and leadership principle. I've been teaching that for a long time. I've just never put it so overtly on the cover of a book. Even though it's at the core of everything that I've taught and everything that I've written and every speech that I've given and every seminar that I've conducted and everything that I've done in this field, is the essence of it is that love is just damn good business. And in fact, the title is actually comes from the rather presumptuous practice of quoting myself. I just found myself saying it a lot in my keynotes. Love is just damn good business. That's why it's important. So
Yeah.
Hey, that's a hell of a book title. So it's an evolution in some ways of what I've been teaching, and it's I just felt it was time to shine the spotlight on it, and it's been really cool to see people's response to it.
Definitely. I think probably due to the nature of your consulting practice, and you go and speak to a lot of people, and in the book you do give a lot of examples of going out and speaking to people and over the years coming into contact with them. And this book was probably a justification of the things that you've been doing previously, because you're probably thinking to yourself, I'm be saying these things over and over again. There's probably something in it. Maybe I should share it with more people.
It's an interesting way to look at it. I don't think it's entirely accurate. It's not so much a justification of what I've been speaking about, because what I've been speaking about is based on what I've observed, right? So it's not like I thought, this love thing is a good idea. Now, how do I go about justifying it? It's more like when I look at all the people that I've worked with over the years, and I've had exposure to, I'm not exaggerating, every kind of organization and every kind of industry you can imagine. I've been doing this for 30 years, right? So in some form or another. So I've had this broad perspective. And when I just stopped and asked, all right, when, all the leaders that I've worked with, and some were really extraordinary and some really sucked, right? what is it that I can surmise, based on observation, that seems to be, the universal element. And what it comes down to is that the greatest leaders that I've met, and these aren't, I'm talking about people that I've met personally and worked with, so not necessarily, historical leaders that have taken their place on the pedestal of history, and I learned about them, from reading other people's books. I'm talking about direct experience. For these people, what is it that they seem to have in common? And it was love. So when I allowed myself to start sharing, as we like to say here in California, sharing what I've seen, that was the scary part. And that started, 20 years ago now, where I started getting up on stage and saying, you know what, this is really all about love. Now let me explain what I mean by that. But that was based on observation. But to your point, this book has little case studies, right? Case after case, after example, after example, after example. And my intent there was not to justify what I've found, but to help people, to help my readers and my clients justify for themselves what many of them, if not most of them, already know to be true. And this is what probably the most significant realization, if that's the right word, that I've had over the years, is that I can't prove this, by the way, but my theory is that most people already believe that love is just damn good business. The problem is most people don't believe that most people believe that love is just damn good business. So they don't say anything. They don't, because they're afraid that they're going to be judged, they're going to be dismissed, they're going to be written off as, California touchy-feely, hoo-ha, kumbaya crap. Yeah. And so really this is about a justification to say, no, your instinct is right, and here's proof, example of people that have acted on that in an overt sort of a way and have gotten tremendous results of all kinds. Everything from the results that we measure in terms of, say, for example, engagement, all the way down to the ever important, in a business context, bottom line and profitability, et cetera. So that's the justification. You see, I'm short answer challenged. I just want you to know.
That's fine. Yeah. As little speaking as I can do, the better. I think people are here for you.
Not me.
So as a follow-up to that, in regards to people that you are saying, it's not the fact that people don't believe it to be true, it's more the fact that they don't embrace it as a concept in itself. What are the barriers to acceptance on that case? Is it fear of judgment in what you were talking about truly accepting it? If you're looking at leaders of businesses accepting that, or perhaps the stigma that might come across in accepting that way of thinking?
I think it is. I think, and again, that's a blanket statement, and it's an overgeneralization because it's going to be different for everybody. Yes. And there are people that are very resistant to this idea that do think it's bullshit. And I think a lot of that, wherever somebody is on that spectrum to, from it's a bunch of crap, all the way to yes, emphatic yes with several exclamation points after it. Anywhere you are on that spectrum is you're going to have some level of nervousness or resistance to it, the more positive you are. And you're going to have a great ease of dismissing it when you're on the negative side of that scale. And I think all that is because of our conditioning. I think we just come from, when I say we, I mean the global we as business people, come from a mindset that says love has no place in business. That business should be, it's not personal, it's just business, that old saying, right? Or it's the business should be a purely rational endeavor. It's all about the bottom line. Human beings are cogs in the machine. And there's that vestige, for some people, I think for most of us nowadays, fortunately, that's just kind of a vestige of the thinking that we used to have, because we're way beyond. This all started, I think, in the industrial age when we started treating people as widgets, because for the first time we had widgets and we had people operating, machinery. But we've come a long way since then, certainly. And it is more and more of an expectation now that people want, and by the way, this is often attributed to millennials, but it's been going on for a while, honestly, that we want meaning in our work. We want purpose. We want to be able to make a contribution. We want to have a fulfilling experience when we go to work. And that's true for everybody. Who doesn't want that? You know, I mean, really, who doesn't want that? We all want that. So there's a recognition that you know, meaningful connection, for example, at work is a good thing, but there's still this history in us that says, yeah, but is it really? You know, what if you had to fire somebody? And so it brings up all of these concerns, which are really, I think, a fundamental misinterpretation of what love means and what it should look like at work. In other words, I think a lot of people, without giving it thought, just the knee-jerk reaction, is that love it means that we're soft. Is that love is soft in a negative sense, that we're a pushover, right? That love means that you know, love means never having to say you're sorry. That love means people can do whatever they want because, you know, the most important thing is that people like me. As long as people like me, then I'm fine. It doesn't mean any of that. Love is not, in a business context certainly, it's not a sentiment. It's a practice and a discipline. And what it says is that if we love our customers, if we love our clients, it's going to affect the way that we offer them products and services. It's going to affect everything, all the way down to the way we structure our business. So I think there's a built-in resistance, but on the other hand, there's also what's the word? An expectation as business people that should say anyway, or at least we give lip service to, that our customers or clients, or whatever terminology they use in their industry, should be the center of our universe, right? We should know this by now. I mean, Tom Peters and Bob Waterman started writing about this in Search of Excellence back in the 80s. And, you know, Tom is one of the greatest management thinkers of our day. And he's been credited, and I think justifiably so, to really shifting the mindset of business to be more people-oriented and more customer-focused. But this has been going on since the 80s now. By the way, Tom is one of my mentors. I was vice president of his company in the 90s.
Oh, great.
It was a long time ago already. But my point is that if we, as decent business people, even decent, we don't have to be great, even decent business people, understand that our competitive advantage is going to come from our customers loving what we do for them. That they need to love the experience of doing business with us. And that experience, you know, is a combination of our product or service, the way we deliver it, user experience,
the whole package. Right?
Yeah. The whole package. If they don't love what we do for them, then we're vulnerable, because if they're just satisfied, they can go down the street, they can click another link, they can and they'll find somebody else that'll satisfy them, and maybe they don't have to pay as much. So we get this, right? So on the one hand, we're saying, yeah, love has no place in business. But on the other hand, we're saying, oh, but our customers need to love us. Well, there's a bit of a schizophrenic kind of a thing going on here. Yeah. So here's my argument, if that's the right word, for love in business. It's very simple. We need our customers to love what we do for them. The only way to create that experience in a meaningful and sustainable way over time is to create a culture or an environment that our people love working in. If I hate working here, it's very difficult for me to create something that my customer is going to love, whether I'm in a customer-facing position or not. All right, and then we back it up one more step. I can't create or contribute to that kind of a culture that people love working in unless what? Unless I'd love it myself first. Love it, love them, love this business. So this all becomes very personal very quickly. But what I've learned is if we ground it in what's the customer experience and work it back from there, then we can begin to answer the question. First we have to ask it, but then answer the question, what should love look like in the way that we do business? In other words, what is it that's going to make our customers love doing business with them? And the flip side of that question is, how do we better show our customers that we love taking care of them? So, and that's it.
Definitely, yeah. It's
That's the whole.
if only it was easy as that in practice.
Not easy.
Yeah,
Not
that's why in the book in particular, I like the section where you mentioned Viktor Frankl, in the sense that when it comes to purpose, because it got me thinking on that part of the book about whether purpose is actually better than passion, because passion can sometimes be fleeting, but purpose is everlasting. And
yeah.
people, perhaps customers in particular, move and make decisions based on values in which the company stands for, which ultimately derives from purpose. So have you seen that in practice, that
Yeah.
purpose drives more action than passion does?
Sure. And I'm not a big fan of either or sort of analysis.
Hmm.
But I think when you look at the long haul, I think it's an accurate statement to say that purpose, and purpose of course is rooted in those other terms that we throw around a lot in business, like mission and values, right?
Hmm.
So our purpose as an organization is to do what? Is to create what? Is to have what kind of an impact? That's going to tie directly into our mission as an organization, the values that we say we stand for. And honestly, passion, as important as it is, can be a bit fleeting, right? I mean, there are times you wake up in the morning, you jump out of bed, and you nowadays run to your computer and start working. That's what I do. We're used to get on a plane to do that. And it's like, and we're filled with the passion and the excitement of the day. And then there are other days where it's like,
It's a crawl.
it's a crawl. It's not a leap. It's a radical crawl.
Yeah.
But the purpose hasn't changed. It's just my passion for today is a little bit on the downside. And I think if all we're doing is focusing on passion, which is the kind of the easiest connection to make to this love thing, right? Then what happens when the passion isn't burning as strong? Does that mean I stop? So that's why purpose is more of an anchor, I would say, or more of a, I'm not sure exactly what the right metaphor is, but it's not to say that it's more important than passion. It just seems to be, it's that kind of thing that keeps us on track as the passion comes and goes.
Do you think?
And I can also intellectually understand that I have a passion for something and not exactly feel it in the moment. That's true as well.
Yeah, definitely. That is true. When you were looking at businesses and you were having a look at their structures when it comes to leaders and in organizations, and you were tracking back to the individual, is that why in the book you gave so many practical tips for the individual? Because you were finding that the company is just a mix of individuals, and you really have to go down to the individual to fix some of the issues that is related to customer experience and customer satisfaction that you were finding.
Yeah, it's a terrific question. There's a really interesting kind of an interplay. So first of all, I give a lot of examples in the book and a lot of things to try and think about because that's what we need. It's very easy to say, yeah, I get it. Love is really important. But then to go and put it into practice, like, well, what the hell do I do with that? And what does that look like? So instead of saying to people, okay, here's your prescription, do this step, this step, this step, this step, I tend to rely more on, here's an example, here's another example, here's how this person did it, here's how that company did it, and then that'll spark your own thinking. But the combination is, and the interplay is between the we, what are we doing as an organization, and the I, what can I do? And ultimately, they're both important, but in different ways, and obviously they tie together, right? Like this old idea that there is no I in team. You've heard that. But what a phenomenally stupid, ridiculous statement. There are, first of all, there are a lot of letters that are not in team. Okay, there is no Q in team either, right? There's no Z in team. All right, fine. But the idea that there is no I in team, every team is made up of I's, of individuals. And a great team brings out the unique talent and perspective and point of view of the individuals on the team. It's just that all those individuals are willing to oftentimes subjugate their ego in order to accomplish what we're trying to do together. So I get the spirit of it, but it tends to say, well, what I think is not important, it's about what we do. It's absurd. So there has to be a time, and this is an essential leadership perspective, where I've got to do something, regardless of what we are or are not doing. So, for example, if somebody reads this book and says, you know what, I want to put this into practice, I'm going to start asking the question, what should love look like in the way that I do business? Well, it's really tempting to say, yeah, but I look around here and nobody gets this where I work. I mean, this is like, there couldn't be anything more opposite to this. Is, this place is it's an emotional wasteland. It's every person for themselves. It's top down command and control. So what? Well, the leadership element here needs to be, instead of saying, well, I can't do that here because these people don't get it, is to say, well, what can I do anyway? What can I do, regardless of what anybody else around here is or is not doing, to act in this way, to lead in this way, to perpetuate this idea, to put this, to do this project. Whatever, you have to answer that for yourself. So it's very individual on that level. And the thing about the we is, and this is something that I've asked many clients to experiment with over the years. If you look at any typical kind of values statement, right? We stand for integrity, we stand for customer service, we are every company has a laminated values statement somewhere, right?
In the drawer. Most
of those use the word we, like I just said. We believe in XYZ. We trust each other. We respect the dignity of the individual. So that's great. But what I often encourage people to do is to take whatever values statement you have in your organization, and where it says we, all the way home, where it says we, just change the pronoun to I and read it that way. I respect the dignity of the individual. I do whatever I can to take care of my customer. And see how that feels. It feels very different, right? So while it's true that we need to do this, that this is our collective, whatever this is our collective standard. The only way that collective happens is by individuals taking personal responsibility for it. And it feels different because, ironically, while the we is important, it's very easy to hide behind, right? As long as we're doing this, I don't really have to.
Yeah.
As long as there's enough people doing this. So it's about, I'm always a big fan of a couple of principles that, again, run through everything that I've ever taught and ever will. And that is, first of all, leadership has nothing to do with your position or title. That you can lead from anywhere in the organization. And it always comes down to that question, what can I do, regardless of what anybody else around here is or is not doing? Not to suggest that this is about being some kind of a hero. You have to enlist other people. But if you're sitting around waiting for other people to get it before you take action, then nothing's ever going to happen. And you're certainly not leading.
That point you made, a very interesting point about the fact that it's not about your title, it's just about what you can offer to the company in which you're working in. Do you feel like over the last 30 years, you've seen a change from a mindset towards that hierarchical structure changing over time? How has that changed? Why do you think that's changed in a way? And what factors do you think have gone behind that? I know that's a very loaded question, but
I'll give you a loaded answer. So the idea that leadership needs to go beyond position or title has been around for quite some time. I believe it started with the whole notion of servant leadership, which is a concept that's been around for a long time now. And the idea behind servant leadership is that my role as a leader is not to have you serve me, but the other way around, that my job is to serve you. My job as a leader is to make sure that you have the resources and the support that you need. And as long as I can serve you in that way, you're going to do great work and we'll all benefit. So that's very much saying that that leadership in the traditional way that we've thought about it, that the person at the top who makes all the decisions, the smartest person in the room, tells everybody what to do, has all the answers, never screws up, never makes a mistake, never has to apologize because they never make a mistake, and they just tell. That is, I think most of us can agree, an archaic concept now. Although there are many people who still behave that way, right? But there are very few people nowadays who will say, no, I think leadership is the sole responsibility for the people at the top of the org chart. Everybody wants to believe that they have a culture where everybody can lead in various contexts, right? But again, there's, as is often the case in the human experience, and particularly in business, there's a gap between the concept and the practice and the behavior. So I think we've become, I get very little pushback to that idea. I'm certainly not the only person who's teaching this and talking about it. I mean, there's probably 1,000, and I'm just guessing here, but maybe thousands of leadership books that say the same thing. But putting it into practice is it's a whole different animal. The good news is that we all, I think there's a collective desire to really make that happen. And therefore, we have a better chance of being more consistently practicing it, right? But there's a caveat to this. Even though leadership has nothing to do with your position or title, so in other words, if I'm sitting at perched at the top of the org chart, that doesn't automatically make me a leader. It puts me in a position of authority, but it doesn't automatically make me a leader. And I'll be polite about this, but I've met plenty of people over the years in my work who sit at the top of the company's org chart and still have, and this is the polite part, a bit of work to do as far as their leadership goes, right? Yeah. And I can't tell you how many people I've met that have no positional authority. They're right there on the front line. Nobody reports to them. They're nobody's boss, and yet they're great leaders. So it's by virtue of who they are, how they live, how they influence people, and their ability to enlist people to change things for the better, regardless of their position or title. But the nuance or the caveat here is, even though leadership doesn't automatically come with the territory for somebody in a position of authority, the expectation of leadership does. In other words, the people that work for you expect you to lead and not just hold this position and bark orders. So it's a really important thing for all of us to pay attention to. This idea that
I've
arrived, I'm now the CEO of the company, that must mean that I have this leadership stuff figured out, is a dangerous thing, because all of us need to continue to learn and grow and adapt and get better at this stuff.
Definitely. And that gap in expectation between what they've actually implemented, what they're trying to implement in practice, and the failure of them to do so, what have you seen those to be the factors? What are the factors? Are they processes? Is it institutional reasons within the company that means they can't make those changes? Is it certain individuals, key individuals at the top, that are stopping them making these changes? What would you say are the mix of factors that go between finding the difference between what they believe to be true and what's actually true?
Yeah, man, everything you just said, I think, factors in. So there's a couple of things that to me kind of rise to the top. Yeah. One is, it's the I talked about this more specifically in the Radical Leap in the first book. It's the idea that if I say the right words, people will believe I'm doing the thing. Right? We've all known people that they read the right books, they get all the right vocabulary words, and they just spew them off, and that's what I refer to as the poser, right? The poser is somebody who says the right words, dresses him or herself up in the clothes of a leader, so to speak, without significantly shifting the way that they lead and how they engage. So it's this idea that I know I'm supposed to do this because everybody says I'm supposed to do it. So if I adopt the vocabulary word, let's all empower everybody. I adopt the right vocabulary word, then essentially what I'm doing is conning myself into thinking that I'm doing this because I get really good at using the word. And the gap in that case is, for some people it's, yeah, I like the idea, but I don't know how to do it. So I'll just pretend, I'll pose because I'm supposed to know because I'm a leader, right? So it's that fear of being seen as incompetent maybe, or not smart enough to figure it out. But for a lot of people, it's even more basic than that. I'll use the vocabulary word because if I can convince people that I'm actually, let's say, empowering people, whatever choose your buzzword, then I don't actually have to do it. Because and I and that'd be great because I don't wanna. I think that's the thing that accounts for a lot of the gaps. Is I don't want. It's like a little kid. I don't want to do that. You can't make me. So personal desire has a lot to do with this. But then there are other more cultural and maybe systemic things. Maybe sometimes there's a gap because we're just not asking the right question. So I'll give you an example. One of the case studies that I wrote about in the book, and it's one of my favorite stories right now, is it's an ongoing story, is a company called Trailer Bridge in Jacksonville, Florida. So Trailer Bridge is a shipping and logistics company. So a very unsexy business, right? They ship stuff in barges. I mean, literally ship on the water from primarily from Jacksonville to Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. And
how far is that? Sorry, I'm bad at geography. How far is that ship going?
I mean, it's not terribly far. I mean, Puerto Rico, it's off the coast, not too far off the coast.
Okay.
Mainland U.S.
Okay.
But the point is that they're in the shipping business, so they ship barges of stuff, right? So let's say you live in Florida and and your family's in Puerto Rico, and you bought a car for your family. How are you going to get it there? Well, you ship it. You put it on a barge, and you ship it. So I won't go into all the details of Trailer Bridge's turnaround, but they went from a toxic environment that was losing money hand over fist. In fact, they went bankrupt and burned through 4 CEOs in 2 years. They turned it around when Mitch Luciano, who's now the CEO of the company, took over. The board gave him his shot, and he was a love guy. So he was a practitioner of what I call extreme leadership. The Radical Leap framework, and he'd read all 3 books at that point and became a part of his leadership philosophy. So he started to ask the question, I want to turn this place around. We're just emerging from bankruptcy. The morale is terrible. Customers, we barely have customers. And the ones that do give us terrible ratings because we have to charge a lot less, otherwise they won't do business with us. There was high turnover among the ranks. People didn't want to work there. So he said, all right, I believe in this place. I need to create an environment that people are going to love working in, which is a radical thought. It was, diametrically opposed to where they were at the time. So he just started to ask the right question, what should love look like? If we were going to create an environment that people actually loved working in, how would that be different? And in answering that question, they came up with a lot of really simple ideas like ditch the name tags. Everybody walked around with name tags on, and the company at the time was 130 people or something like that. So we should know each other's names. There's not that many people here. So the symbolic gesture, get rid of the name tags, lower the cubicle so people can actually see each other, get management out of the office and spend time with people. Let's build out the break room and put in a ping pong table, foosball table, popcorn machine so people will hang out together. Then they started bringing in a food truck every Thursday, and they fed the entire company. Why? Because they wanted people to have lunch together. Why? Because then you get to know each other. Why is that important? Because the more I know people around here, the more friends I'm going to have, the more I'm going to look forward to coming to work. It's going to change the experience of work. I want people to love working here. That means they have to know each other. So we put them together and let them talk. And that things started to change. Little by little, they started to change. And then he asked So here's, again, like any other company, customer service is important, right? That's the word. The gap in the behavior is, in their case, well, we say customer service is important, but look at our scores and look at our business, and obviously we're not acting that way. So they asked this question. They changed the question. And it was, I'm paraphrasing here, but it was some variation on this theme. How can we better show our customers that we love them? Right? Now, if you ask the question, as many of us have, how can we improve customer service around here? It's a good question. It's a good question. It's not a great question. It's a good question because it'll engender probably some answers, right? Well, we could try this, we could do that. It'll improve our customer service. But when you change the question to how can we better show our customers that we love them, or what can we change so that our customers love the experience of working with us, now you've raised the bar. Completely different answer that you have to give. So this idea that love is somehow soft and squishy is nuts, because it actually raises expectations. It doesn't lower them. It raises the standards, doesn't lower them. So that's what they did. So they looked at their customer policy, and they had this long-standing policy that unless a barge was at least 75% full, they would not sail, right? So they had to fill it at least 75%, or it would just sit in the harbor until they filled it up some more. Now, if you look at the balance sheet, well, that makes perfect sense. The reason that they didn't was because they would lose money on that shipment. And we're not in the business to lose money, so obviously we can't ship if it's only 60% full. So it would just sit. So back to that car that I mentioned a few minutes ago, you're sending a car to your family in Puerto Rico, you tell them it's going to be there on such and such a date, that date comes and goes, and then you call Trailer Bridge and you say, what the hell's going on with my car? And they say, well, it hasn't shipped yet because we couldn't sell enough space. What does that say to the customer, right? So they asked a little different question. They looked at that policy and they said, okay, if we loved our customers, what would we do in that circumstance? If you ask it that way, the answer was obvious. We would ship, we would sail, because that's what we told them we would do. And that's what they started doing, which meant that at first they lost money on some of these shipments, but then they started to get, their reputation started to change, as a combination of all the things they were doing. And now fast forward, I'll just go right to the punchline on this. These guys have been voted #1 and #2 best place to work in the city of Jacksonville. They're more profitable than they've ever been. The last couple of years have been more profitable than the previous 25 years of the company combined. And just this year, again, they were voted #1 best place to work in the city of Jacksonville. And if you talk to Mitch Luciano, who at first would not take the title of CEO, he said, I'll have to earn it. Well, he's earned it. So he is the CEO. And you ask him how they've done this, he'll say it's because we built a culture of love. And in fact, he's written a couple of cool articles on LinkedIn about that very thing, just recently, within the last month or so.
Oh, definitely. Definitely share that with me. I'll be interested to read it.
Yeah.
It was an interesting story within the book.
So there's the gap, right? You have to, it's not about saying the right words. You have to hold yourself accountable to live up to those words. And the reason that we don't is because we're afraid to, we're lazy, we don't believe it's really possible, we don't really want to, or we're just asking the wrong questions, and we're not engaging people on the level that we should be engaging them to answer those questions.
Definitely. I think that was a great example within the book. And I also like the aptive one. I think the aptive example was a wonderful example because industry-wise, you always have this idea that if you're in the financial services game, then it's all about money. It's not about love. It's all about just making sure you're screwing over as many people as you can to make as much money. And I did like that example because, like you said, in regards to going above and beyond, so asking the love question rather than the customer satisfaction, because one's the baseline, the other is what else can you do. So when you're giving perks to your staff, don't just give what everyone else is giving. Find ways that you can really go above and beyond, not only for your staff, but also for your customers. And what I liked about that one in particular, I think it was that one that was talking about the idea of flexible working, because I think that's now become more of an understood practice for companies to be made available for their staff, basically due to the last 6 or 8 months being at home.
No kidding. Boy, have we gotten a crash course in flex time.
I know you must have been seeing what's been playing out the last 8 months and thought to yourself, I've been saying these things for years.
Oh, that's so funny you say that, because what I hear a lot, because I do a lot of virtual stuff, right?
Yeah.
As everybody is. So I'm talking to a lot of people in various parts of the world, and I'm hearing things like, I love the phrase "now more than ever," right? Now more than ever, man. We need love, we need connection, we need support, we need flexibility, we need. I'm like, okay, yeah, but that's always been true. It's not suddenly true. It's always been true. It's just that what's happening is the circumstance has brought the need for this front and center, where we can't deny it. And we're having, like I said, a crash course. We're having an experience in, hey, if you leave me to my own devices, I'm gonna be more productive. People are being much more. In fact, they're working too much. You got people burning out on Zoom fatigue and all that because they're working their asses off. And I mean, it feels that way literally to me some days. My ass is asleep. Like, I gotta get up and move around because I'm just glued to the computer all day. So people are being very productive. Now, I talked about my friend Lonnie Golden in the book, who's a professor at Penn State, and his field of focus has been on flex time. He's a labor economist, and it's really very interesting. Well, what we've seen in when I say we, I mean they. I just
you're tagging along because you're a friend.
Insert myself into their research. Here's what we've found: that when workers have more flexibility as to when they work, they get happier. They get more productive because, for obvious reasons, right? Because obviously, for one thing, the company's saying, I trust you. And trust is a reciprocal thing. We tend to trust people that trust us. We tend to distrust people that distrust us. So when a company says, I trust you, you figure out when you have to work. I care about you because I know, your kid, has a sports event that's really important, or you have to go to a teacher meeting. Go do it, and I trust you that you're going to make up for it. So what they've been finding is in environments where you would think is just not conducive to that sort of a thing, companies that engage in that flex time approach get really great response and results from their employees. And now, as you said, we're all seeing it. We are. There's always exceptions to the rule. Again, I'm very reluctant to make blanket statements, but for the most part, human beings are trustworthy. We want to do a good job. We want to prove ourselves to each other. There's always exceptions. There are always people that are just slackers, of course. But to run an entire organization expecting that everybody is going to perform to the lowest level of expectation is just a terrible way to live, and it's just damn bad business.
It's slightly pessimistic, isn't it? If you're a leader and you're assuming.
What's the opposite of this? It's just damn bad business.
Maybe that's the next one.
That's the next. That'll be the sequel.
Counterweight. Explore both sides of it. You'll learn the market.
Love sucks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Be an interesting exercise. Actually.
I think it'll be interesting to see from maybe not publish it, but definitely do an exercise on perhaps what is the counterweight to it. And then you might even go down the rabbit hole of even establishing why this is even more important by analyzing the other side and seeing the examples that you find.
Yeah, well, in the previous books that are all written as novels, I mean, what makes for a good story is you have to have, you've got to have an antagonist. You have to have contrarian character point of view. So all of my previous books have had that. It's the counterpoint to the lesson that's being taught. Because in a business novel or parable or fable or whatever, the delivery mechanism is the story. But the intent is to teach something because it's that kind of a book, but you do it through the story. And a good story has those opposing ideas and the challenges that the protagonist has to overcome and all of that. Otherwise, it's just a conversation. It's not a story. So I am really fond of exploring the contrarian point of view because I do have a bit of I'm a smart ass. I'm not a cynic. I'm probably the furthest thing from a cynic you're ever going to find, but I am. I do love to anticipate the opposite side of things. So whenever I speak and whenever I write, I'm always thinking about what's the objection to this, right?
You play devil's advocate all the time.
Yeah, devil's advocate to my own ideas. So in writing a novel, it's really fun to give voice to that and to have the smarmy, cynical, immovable character who just thinks this is a load of crap. And it's great fun. It's great fun to write.
Did you miss doing that for this book? Because I'm assuming, what was the change? Why did you make the change from writing the business fables and stories to then writing something a bit more like this? Did you feel like you needed to write something like this, or you just wanted to change?
I think that there were a couple of reasons. One is that I'd never done it.
Okay.
So I wanted to try it. The other is that the fable approach is not for everybody. There are some people that will just dismiss it out of hand if it's written that way, and then like for example, there's one business author that I didn't know really well, but I knew I had connections with him through Tom Peters and all of that, and I had asked him to write a blurb, a book cover endorsement for Greater Than Yourself when it came out, and he wrote back to me and he said, I love the idea of the book. It's a great title. He said, but I don't do parables. I don't read them. I won't read them. So it's like, okay. So I figured there's a lot of people like that. And honestly, getting press, getting coverage on it, getting PR is a lot harder with the fable than it is with more of a traditional business book. So there were reasons that I wanted to try it, but also I thought given the subject matter, that it was time to give people lots of concrete ideas and stories and examples. And the fun thing about writing a novel is that you just get to make shit up, right? So I didn't want to, it's just like all of my in the novels. I mean, it's great fun because I get to do that. The characters are composites, based on people that I've known. I've had characters in my books do things that I've asked clients to do that never would. And I thought, oh, now I can make them do it in the context of the story. But for this subject, I really wanted to give lots and lots of good, hard, real world evidence so people wouldn't have the out of saying, you just made that up.
Definitely. I think the legitimacy comes when in practice, doesn't it? A lot of the time. Because I can personally appreciate, I haven't read many business stories or business fables, so I can't really comment. But for me, I like it when, and a lot of my followers like it, when you read something and there's practical things that you can implement based on other people's stories. Because essentially that's why you read a lot of the time, especially nonfiction, is to learn from what other people have learned from, so that when you go through it, you know how to address it and you're not basically sitting there having an OSM, as you say in the book, like an oh shit moment, thinking to yourself, oh crap, how do I deal with this? And it was actually funny that you mentioned that. So the first time you mentioned that in the book, I remember specifically my first ever job. I worked for the government in the UK, and I just started a grad scheme, and I was traveling like 4-hour commute into central London for my job, and in that in that I was 2 weeks in and they asked me to do a presentation. We went to like a conference and it was like a finance meeting. I worked in finance. So you go in there and they're like, oh, Orna, why don't you do a presentation? And I thought to myself, okay, that's fine. I'm pretty happy with the conversation. I'm like, so how many people are there? They're like 300. I'm like, oh. So this is my first job in finance and I'm 2 weeks into a job and you want me to do a presentation.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, okay, that's fine. I thought I'd have 2 weeks to pump myself up about it. But as I was walking to the stage, I thought to myself, what have I done? And because you see everyone when you're in the hall and you're like, oh, everyone's looking at you. And I remember standing on that stage thinking to myself, holy crap, are any words going to come out my mouth? And that's why I just had a flashback to when I was reading that piece in the book. And I thought to myself, but it was in those moments where I actually had so much growth, not only in confidence, but in the ability to say to myself, okay, I've done that. Now what's next? Because passion, I think, has a negative connotation in people thinking that they shouldn't put themselves in strenuous situations or challenge themselves. But it's in those moments that you find that growth and you find that opportunity to do stuff. And I actually think organizations that encourage people to put themselves in those situations really allow their staff to really excel. And I think in organizations that I've worked in that have really pushed their employees, I think that's when they get the most out of them.
Yeah.
I like that example in the book because I really was able to relate to it.
Yeah, well, it's very central to the human experience. So to be clear, the OSM, I spell it capital O, capital S, exclamation mark, capital M, right? The oh shit moment is, in many ways, it's the experience of what acting from a place of love feels like. So, in other words, if I have this desire to change things for the better around here. The practice that I call audacity, right? It's challenging the status quo. It's taking a stand, enlisting people to make things better, to changing my piece of the world for the better. I'm driven by love to do that, right? I have a love for the people that I'm working with. I have a love for the idea. I have a love for the future that could be markedly better than the present. So that's what impels me to step up, oftentimes. But once I step up and take action on it, that's where the OSM comes in, right? So the love is the motivator, the fear, it's kind of a weird mixture of fear and exhilaration kind of wrapped in together, is what it feels like. So what happens is that oftentimes, we are likely to interpret the OSM or even the anticipation of the OSM as a sign that something is wrong, because it scares us, and we have that fight or flight sort of a reaction. And actually, in the right context, it's a sign that something is right. So when you gave that presentation in front of 300 people in your first 2 minutes of working in that job, right? That was a tremendous. I know this is going to sound like a cliche. What a great growth opportunity, right? Now, why were you scared? Well, because there was a chance that you would stand up in front of all those people and your pants would fall down. Or there's a chance that you'd stand up in front of all those people and nothing would come out of your mouth. And then everybody's, pointing and snickering and laughing at you, right? So the OSM is there because there is a risk. And a risk by definition means there's a chance of so-called failure. There's a chance that this won't work.
But that precipice.
But there's also a chance that it will.
Yeah, definitely.
It's just that in that moment, we can't distinguish between the two because we haven't had the outcome yet, right? So this is about reframing, to use that pop psychology term. It's about saying, oh, there's the OSM. I'm walking up to the front of the room. There's 300 people there. They're all looking at me. Oh, I'm scared. That doesn't mean something is wrong. That means that that's natural. That means that I'm about to, so now I can look at that and go, okay, that's cool. That's the way it's supposed to be. Now let's just go crush this.
Definitely. I think the more you put yourself in that situation, I think the more you understand that those feelings are usual. Yes. And it's not running away from them, it's embracing them and then how to use them. So I definitely think that's true.
And they are relative too, by the way. So the more you get up in front of 300 people and speak, the less of an OSM that is.
Definitely.
And so then you got to go look for something else, right? Because by pursuing that, that's how you know you're continuing to grow. So what's going to scare you next? Let's go do that.
Exactly. Well, funnily enough, I actually signed up recently for a 50-kilometer ultra. So that's kind of scaring me at the moment.
50 kilometers.
Yeah, so I know I told my followers that. So over lockdown, I was in a pretty good routine when it came to going to the gym and stuff before, and then obviously with all these things happening, I know they've reopened here in the UK, but I just don't feel comfortable going. So I took up like running quite a bit just to get out of the house, you know. And I've been watching videos and on YouTube, and that's never a good thing. And I've kind of just saw people running ridiculous miles, and I thought, you know what,
Wow.
let's do this.
See,
So,
I've gone the opposite sort of a way. Not that I've stopped exercising, but I've actually been focusing a lot on breathing.
oh, interesting. Have you read any
Yeah.
stuff?
Yeah. So breath
Yes.
is a
James
phenomenal.
Nestor. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a terrific book. And you know, his in reading that book, I was already doing Wim Hof
Okay.
breathing,
Yep.
which I do every day. And you know, so for the uninitiated who are listening to this conversation, you know, Wim Hof is the Iceman, right? So he does, you know, ice. He's set all
Challenges.
kinds of records, but he also has a breathing methodology, which is like this: you breathe 30 to 40 times, real deep consecutive breaths, and then after the somewhere between 30 and 40 repetitions, on the exhale, you hold your breath for as long as you can until you can't hold it any longer, and then when you can't hold your breath any longer, you take one more deep breath in and you hold that for 15 seconds and you let it go, and that's one round. So it does some really amazing things to the physiology. So I do 3 to 4 rounds of that, but then one of the more advanced techniques in that is, after you've done a few rounds, when you breathe 30 to 40 times, exhale, hold your breath. While you're holding your breath, drop down and do as many push-ups as you can while you're holding your breath. And so I started doing that a few weeks ago.
Okay, nice.
And I've got it up to my personal record so far is 63.
That's pretty good.
Pretty good for a 62-year-old. So
Yeah, that's really good.
more than one push-up per year.
Yeah.
But so that's been my exercise during the week, and then I go and I work out on the weekends at a CrossFit gym that I love the community, and we'd set up outside in the parking lot,
Okay, nice.
6 feet apart, and it works great.
I've
But
read it.
running is not my thing. But I'm breathing a lot, man. I'm breathing, and I'm also doing one of the things that I learned from the book Breath is the Buteyko Method.
Okay, yes.
So I've been doing that during the day. That's very kind of more. It's in a lot of ways the opposite of Wim Hof. It's very subtle
Yeah.
but it involves some breath holding while you're working out, and never breathing through your mouth, except when you're talking.
Yeah.
Eating.
It's interesting because I was reading Breath by James Nestor, and he's talking a lot about nose breathing. And I thought to myself, do you know what? I'm going to try this while I'm running. And for some reason, you just can't get enough air in. And I don't know why. And I remember I read a lot about it. I read a lot about it when it came to running and especially, yeah, definitely you have to work up to it. But I think in relation to running for a long distance, I think for like short distances, it's okay. But I think if you're running for an extended period of time, it would take a lot of training to get up to a stage where you're just doing it through the nose. Because I was trying it and I thought to myself, no, this is not going to work. It's definitely something that you need to go up to. But how have you seen differences in your not only your physiology but mental state when it's come to doing those exercises, those breathing exercises?
Significant. So I've been primarily a mouth breather my entire life. And when I started putting attention on just keeping my mouth closed during the day and focusing on my on my breath, the first few days felt significantly different on so many levels. It just felt like something was changing. I don't know that it felt better, other than the intellectual knowledge that it is better.
Mm.
But since then, I'm just a lot calmer and feel a lot better. And it's a practice. It's an ongoing practice. The whole, with all the talk that we've had about mindfulness and so forth, in recent years, focusing on your breath you're in the moment, because your breath is in the moment. So that's been really helpful. The Wim Hof stuff gives me great energy, and it's odd, but when you oxygenate your body, oxygenate the cells in your body by doing all that breathing and breath holding, it's amazing what the body. I can't do 63 push-ups without doing 3 rounds of that breathing and then holding my breath. If I just drop down and try to do as many push-ups as I can right now, I'd probably do, I'm gonna guess, 40, maybe 40 to 50. I'm pretty strong, but I was just amazed at I was like, I'm not breathing, and this is, my muscles aren't, and then I don't get sore. It's weird.
That's weird.
It's cool stuff.
That's weird. Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to explore it a bit more. It's only recently I've really probably the same as you, started to read a bit more about it and saw more people talk about it, I think.
Yeah.
And recently over the last couple of months. So yeah, definitely something worth to explore.
The other book that I'm reading, actually I'm listening to this, which is quite an endeavor, because it's 40 hours of listening time. is the book about Lincoln.
Okay.
Called, A Team of Rivals.
Okay.
Fantastic. Just I've never really been a history buff, U.S. history or any kind of history really, but I thought, this would be a good time to learn about Lincoln, because I just kind of had this feeling, subtle feeling, that it would be a real kind of soothing experience to read about an incredible leader in a very divisive time in the U.S.
Okay.
And to hear in his own words and the people around him. So, Team of Rivals is that when Lincoln was elected, he assembled a cabinet of people that were his political rivals. Mm-hmm. He went out of his way to bring people into the fold, and he was so brilliant and funny. And what's amazing to read, a book about the 1860s, is everybody wrote back then. Everybody read books, and everybody wrote. They wrote journals, they wrote letters. So virtually all of these accounts are in their own words, and what they said, and in what people in direct contact with them, with all these characters, said about them. And it's really inspiring to know. Regardless of where anybody is on the political spectrum, to look at a historic figure like that, and then learn in their own words what their approach was to leading, it's super inspiring, just incredible. Books are good things.
They're great things.
I guess that's my point.
They are great things. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about learning from people who have come before you.
Yeah.
And obviously comparing it to individuals who are here today and some flaws that they might have, or a lot of flaws, but also to find ways in which you can improve and find ways to do it yourself. That's why I'm quite a big history reader, but I tend to go back quite a bit way before. So I read a lot about Ottoman Empire history, Byzantine, just because I like that period of history. But I studied at school the Cold War, and I studied early Russian history. So I read a lot about the Soviet gulags. I read a lot about later on in the Cold War about the individuals in play and how people were able to deal with the torment of other people, but also keep their calm and make rational decisions when millions of people have lost, Bay of Pigs, we know with JFK, that kind of example.
Right.
Making those decisions when the world is at the brink of nuclear disaster is stuff that movies are made of, but when you read it, you realize that it actually happened, and you think to yourself, oh my God, how would I have acted in the same situation? Because those are what those stories really teach you. And
Yeah.
it's how would have I done it differently? How would I have acted in that situation? Which I think is what I like about reading, essentially.
Yeah, I think the other thing, yeah, so true. The other thing that the impact that I noticed it has on me, well, this is true for any book, is when you read a book, you're entering into an ongoing conversation, right? A giant conversation. Yeah. And for anybody who listens to your podcast or follows you on social media on Instagram or reads your magazine or whatever, I'm sure you have a lot of writers who listen to this as well, or aspiring writers.
Writers, definitely.
And I think the idea that you could actually write something that's going to make a meaningful contribution without reading is really not accurate. I don't think you can really contribute to the conversation unless you know what's being said. And so the impact of reading this historical account of the pre-Civil War and the Civil War in the U.S. and hearing all of these accounts in Lincoln's own words and Seward and Chase and all these other guys, ended up being in this cabinet, made me feel like I'm part of it. Because there's the tendency to think, well, that happened so long ago. Life was so different back then. Well, it was. I mean, people were candlelight and gaslight at night. Nobody was watching TV, right? So on the one hand, it was an entirely different world, but it was so similar. It was so similar. The political stuff and the arguments and the name calling and all that kind of thing. We're like tame compared to the way they were back then. Yeah. And it just makes me feel good that I'm a part of a much longer story than whatever, decades I have or any of us has on this planet.
Definitely.
So yeah, it's just a really important thing to do. And then we have an opportunity when we write to add our voice to it. It doesn't matter if it's been said before. It doesn't matter. It's not about coming up with an entirely original idea. It's about adding our perspective to the conversation. And nobody has the same voice that you do or that I do. And if we're lucky enough that people resonate with our voice and our perspective and point of view, then we have books that sell, and there are things, there are ways that we can have an impact. But at the very least, we get our voice out there and we throw it into the mix for other people to read at some point.
That quote about history, that always resonates with me. It was in the top of my history class when I was at school, but it was the only thing that we learn from history is that we learn nothing at all. I think it was Winston Churchill. But yeah, definitely. I think human psychology don't change, but it's only circumstances. And I think that's why I love sharing reading, because I'm a student of politics. So I studied politics at university. But I don't really read about current affairs. But the sole reason I don't is because when I was at university, I realized that everything that I was reading, even dating back into Roman politics and reading about what they did in their Senate, I was like, that's the same thing as going on here. Like, there's no difference. If you watch a video of the House of Commons and they're one side or the other and they're flapping their papers at one another, and you're like, this could be, in Rome in I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, you guys have a much more entertaining approach to politics than
to us watching
House of Commons versus, one person talking to the camera on C-SPAN and droning along. You guys do it right.
Next time when you come to the UK, definitely see if you can sit in the House of Commons, because I did an internship with my MP and I sat in there, and it was very entertaining. It was very entertaining. So definitely worth a thing. before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask one last question. It was related to the book, and it was one I was thinking about was, do you think that doing what you love has an intrinsically selfish connotation to it, or do you think that's what we have been told about it? Because I feel like people have this do what you love is selfish, and it's not about helping others.
Yeah. So, wow, what a great question, and a great last question, because so the answer to that is potentially yes, in both circumstances, or both answers are potentially yes. It could be very selfish, and a lot of times we dismiss it because we think that it's selfish. So the framework that and it's also the subtitle of the book, as you know, is do what you love in the service of people who love what you do. And the whole book is structured that way. So each of those, there are 3 sections to that statement, and they're each important. Do what you love in the service of people who love what you do. So doing what you love is the foundation for this. That's your personal connection to whatever it is that you're doing. So yes, it's really important to do what you love. But if that's as far as it goes, that is not necessarily a positive contribution. So you could argue that criminals are doing what they love too. God bless him. He's doing what he loves, knocking over that bank. What fun. So you're doing, I don't know if people knock over banks anymore, but so
yeah, virtual.
Doing what you love is the foundation, but it's not the whole story. So that's where the second phrase comes in the service of people. So if I'm doing what I love and I'm using that love to serve people, and you know, there are lots of different categories of people: serving my customers, serving my colleagues, serving my family, serving my community, serving my friends. Yes, I'm doing what I love, but I'm giving value to you. And I'm not just serving you because out of some sort of sense of minimal obligation, but I want to serve you in such a profound way that it really has an impact. And what will happen is that you are likely to reciprocate. You're likely to love me in return, to love what I do for you. That's when we have an ideal client, right? When the person raises their hand and says, I love what you're doing. So it comes full circle. I'm doing what I love in the service of people who love what I do is the ideal scenario. So a good place that I'd love people to start thinking about this is, if you were to rate yourself right now, and pick whatever context you want, but let's, for the sake of conversation, in the context of business, let's say, okay? So are you doing what you love? On a scale of 1 to 10, are you doing what you love? It's a self-analysis, right? And then, are you serving people? On a scale of 1 to 10, to what degree are you serving people? And then finally, on a scale of 1 to 10, to what degree do the people you're serving love how you're serving them? Now, of those 3, the first one is really the only one that you can answer by yourself. To what degree do you love what you do? The second one, to what degree are you serving people? You have a guess at that, but it's the people that you're ostensibly serving that need to answer that, right? And then the final one, to what degree are those people loving how you're serving them? That is entirely for them to answer, which is, you know, very similar to the Net Promoter Score and other sorts of things. So if all I'm concerned about is what I love doing, and I have no concern as the impact of those behaviors on anybody else, as long as I'm doing what I love, that's just another way of saying narcissism, taken to an extreme. Now, the other thing to consider is, maybe I love doing it, but there really is no service involved. I'm not hurting anybody, but there's no service. I love the activity, but I love it for me. Well, that's great. It's just not. It's not a vocation. It's an avocation. It's a hobby, and that's wonderful. That's fantastic. A lot of times people think, well, you know, all I got to do is, if I do what I love, then money will fall on my head, and if I can't find a way to do what I love and make money at it, that somehow that's a failure. That's just not true. I mean, sometimes you really love doing something, but there's just no money in it. Or maybe maybe you don't have the level of skill required to earn money at it. And maybe you never will. Does that mean you're a failure? No. It just means you can't make money at it. You do something else to make money, but don't give that up. So that's, like a lot of the great questions. Yes, that's great questions, man. I mean, you really do. It's phenomenal. And one of the things that characterizes a great question is that there are so many levels to the answer, right? So that's my take on it. Do
Well,
what you love. Service of people, love what you do.
Well, subtitle of the book. Steve, thank you for taking the time. It was a great conversation, and I, as well as a lot of my followers listening to this, will have learned a lot from you. So thank you for taking the time again, and I look forward to reading the preceding books as well. I know we discussed that briefly, but yeah.
It's been a great pleasure.
Thanks, Steve.